Step 1. If only it was that simple, you think as the train rattles on. But what should Step 1 be? You should have finished your presentation yesterday. When you arrive, the city council will demand answers on how to slay the dragon. Okay, Step 1, use bait. No, it doesn't have to be gold. Anything shiny will do. Dragons behave a bit like bowerbirds or collectors of vintage Garfield merch. They hoard bright objects to make their nest more desirable. And these days, that usually just means random bits of trash, so yeah. To lure a dragon, you can keep your gold, unless you have a few hundred carrots lying around, in which case, leave it with me for safekeeping, huh? Will that joke land, you wonder? These people do think they're being attacked by a dragon, after all. Although you're pretty sure it's just an overgrown phoenix or something. Well, Step 2, avoid eye contact as you approach. Despite what you may remember from movies or history or 6th grade biology, dragons and lesser drakes won't attack unless confronted directly. So, as you would any large predator, keep your eyes on the ground, no photos, and you should be fine. Not that anyone ever listens to that one. The train's rattling is giving you a headache. A few seats forward, locals are loudly gossiping about the beast. I don't understand why they don't just catch the cretin in a big net. A big net? Would that work? God, no, you're losing your mind. Harold, if you let a dragon live, it'll ruin the countryside. You stare out at the countryside the dragon will supposedly ruin. There's less and less space for dragons anywhere these days, but for centuries that's just the way things have been headed. The very pace of modern life is at odds with magical creatures, everyone knows that. A teacher once told you that almost 4 times as many people now live in cities than lived, period, at the dawn of the 20th century, with over 3,000 tons of infrastructure per person. Civilization is a creeping Goliath of metal and concrete and rules that frankly doesn't have room for giant, unpredictable f***ing reptiles, so... Right, Step 3, confirm the dragon must be slain. This one's pretty quick if the culprit has damaged A, houses, B, crops, or C, local pets. So B, in this case, according to the news, then an official like myself can give you a price estimation for its extermination. But couldn't we just leave it alone? Harold continues, distracting you. Harold, for God's sake, it isn't natural. Actually, that's a common misconception. You think dragons are dangerous, but they're an inherent part of the food web. Some have even argued their removal causes unicorn populations to spiral out of control and ends up harming the biosphere long term. You know the extermination of wolves affected regions in similarly unpredictable ways, even changing the shape of rivers, as unchecked herbivores diminished vegetation, which worsened soil erosion. There's a term for these sorts of spiraling disasters, trophic cascades, you think? You consider adding this to your presentation, but it's not really the sort of thing officials like to hear. You're arriving at the city now. It's just like every other city you've been to. Its size about city-sized, its population roughly average. You get off the train and become another face in the crowd. City Hall is close to the station, and once inside, you follow the signs to the office of a council member. You here to slay the dragon, the official grunts when you enter. The man smells vaguely of ricotta cheese and wet socks. His name tag says Gary, but his desk says Brian. Wait, so which is it? You shake hands, but he doesn't introduce himself. You got a PowerPoint on how to slay it or what? Oh yes, I've prepared a presentation. That's almost finished, you think. He grunts again and waves you towards a weird-looking chair in the corner, and while he steps out, you open your laptop and hastily resize images for Step 4, Determine Extermination Method. Swords and other melee weapons are of course traditional, you've written, but that usually means contracting a knight, and there's a reason why that's fallen out of practice. Aside from their wins historically being against smaller worms and lindworms, knights tend to be massive so you're better off working with a safety liaison like myself. For extermination, we recommend using a large amount of a poisonous compound like sodium cyanide or a small amount of fairy dust, but only if you have access to a hazmat suit in a Class 3 fallout shelter. Ugh. You're debating removing the fairy dust suggestion altogether when Brian Gary pops back in and says, no time for presentations. Tell me as we drive. Perplexed, you follow the man out a back entrance where a 2009 Toyota Camry is parked beside a dumpster. He opens the door and you climb inside. Sorry, where are we going? You ask, probably too late as you're already in a moving vehicle with the man. Brian Gary says nothing, just floors it through a red light. God, why'd they send you for this? Usually they'd send Henderson, but then Henderson went and called those centaurs some, outdated terms, so yeah, obviously he got fired.
We're gonna hunt the dragon ourselves,
Brian Gary says. Oh, you say, I'm actually more of a hands-off...
Yeah, sounds good.
Brian Gary says, then slams on his horn. Seeing how there probably isn't a dragon, you decide it's not worth arguing. The city speeds past outside the car window. A municipality of this size would have once been home to a healthy gargoyle population, but as older buildings are demolished, such species tend to vanish. The only animals you spot are birds pillaging for scraps. You've heard birds are better adapted for cities than most animals, able to make a living in the smallest nooks of an urban environment, sticking to rooftops and staying out of sight. You consider how dragons are therefore extremely out of luck, because really the only way any animal is tolerated in a city is by being small and staying undetected, so... Jesus, Brian Gary really loves that horn. As you drive on in awkward togetherness, you decide on step 5, prepare basic fireproofing. Always have a Class D extinguisher on hand, but exercise caution before using water-based deterrents. Dragon flame is fueled by their biosecretions, so in practice it behaves a bit like a grease fire. Any liquid has a high chance of spreading the substance and making things worse, so if you do call Fire Protective Services, you want to make sure they have proper equipment and have read all the safety briefings. Not that you've finished writing the safety briefings. The landscape outside has transitioned to farmland, and you notice smoke is still rising from the fields. It's a little disconcerting. Perhaps there is a dragon here after all. So who actually saw this creature, you ask?
Daryl's our primary eyewitness,
Brian Gary says. Right, who's...
Daryl's the worst.
He shows you a picture of Daryl on his phone, who seems utterly normal.
You heard of Satan?
Yes? You say, bewildered.
Daryl's like 10 Satans.
Okay, I don't see how that's possible. Just then, the car comes to a screeching halt. We're here, Brian Gary grunts. He's parked the 2009 Toyota Corolla at the edge of the forest. The forest appears about forest-sized, most of the trees seemingly tree-shaped. If this is where the dragon set up, you'd think it could be a species of common green or maybe some sort of timber worm. Overhead, the branches are eerily quiet. As you and Brian Gary venture further from the car, he mentions how there aren't as many animals here as there used to be. Most of the large predators were exterminated as people moved in, same as everywhere, you suppose. It's not that you don't understand why people wanted predators gone. In your experience, when someone pictures a wolf or a dragon, they don't just picture the animal itself, but how it appeared in centuries of fairy tales and children's cartoons that cast the creatures as menacing villains. Human hatred of such creatures is a time-honored tradition. King Edgar of England demanded 300 wolf pelts yearly, and twice that many dragon hides, and a few centuries later, both creatures were gone from the English and Welsh countryside, though they remained on flags and statues. People liked the idea of the thing, just not the thing itself. We imagine the removal of predators came naturally from farmers protecting livestock, but historically the mass eradication of a species is because of bureaucratic demands. In the US, the extinction of wolves was systematized, the federal government essentially waging war against the creatures, conducting mass poisonings that exceeded the wishes of local farmers. You suppose your job is sort of the modern equivalent to these practices, but you don't like this thought, so you push it down. Instead, you think through the next part of your presentation. Step 6, quarantine the body. After slaying the dragon, remember that the days where it was considered safe to take the bones as keepsakes or personal collector's items have long passed. Dragons contain within their anatomy a high concentration of unstable magical isotopes, and their remains are now classified as serious biohazards. So close the area off as completely as you are able, and remember the ecosystem will certainly recover stronger than before in the creature's absence. But is that true? The deeper you and Brian Gary venture into the forest, the harder it is to shake the sense that something vast and wild has been plucked from the biosphere, leaving a gaping hole. There was a book you were reading on the train that mentioned how in Europe, trees and shrubbery still retain adaptations to resist elephants, a remnant from the late Pleistocene where such beasts still roamed the European continent. It's hard to overstate how much wilder the world once was, harder still to imagine living in such a wilderness. Sure, it's easy to look around a forest and think everything is perfectly natural, exactly the way it's always been, but as recently as 6,000 years ago, your average temperate woodland had not only species of bears and wolves, but forest-dwelling bison, and of course a healthy variety of drake species too. And what does it mean, you suddenly wonder, that we've pulled the teeth out of the forest? You look back down the path and realize Brian Gary has disappeared. You've lost the path as well. Well, that's fine. Like all agents, you've got your standard issue survival kit with you. You check your compass and determine which direction north is, then realize you don't actually know what to do with that information. You think you hear a faint roar overhead, and the woods appear a fair bit larger than moments ago. You pick a direction and try to ignore your sudden hunger. All around you, small animals are having no trouble finding dinner. Right, you can find food too, surely. Some berries are safe to eat, right? What about mushrooms? You're halfway through picking some when you realize you're likely about to poison yourself. It's never quite sunk in before just how different this world is from the one most people inhabit. How when you tear down the artifice of safety, we all delude ourselves into trusting nature is a yawning abyss and nothing can protect you from— oh, there's the road, you were like 3 feet from it. Where'd you go? Brian Gary jump scares you. Not wanting to admit you got lost, you just stand there.
Well, path turns this way,
he says. You continue on and he starts going on about how he got lost in Yellowstone National Park a few years back. You're only half listening until he says,
you know, Manhattan used to have more animal species per acre than Yellowstone before they put in all the buildings.
Is that true, you wonder? It sounds kind of made up.
It's a miracle that Central Park exists at all, Brian Gary says. Are you familiar with Ebenezer Howard, the esteemed 19th century utopianist?
Has Brian Gary been replaced by a f***ing changeling? Where's this coming from?
So Howard was an urban planner, and lots of modern parks in large cities are based on his philosophy. He believed that modern life too strongly divided people from nature, that without exposure to more natural landscapes, human beings would lose their sense of continuity with the world around them and live segmented, unfulfilled lives. Actual interaction with the wilderness is fundamentally different than trying to study and control it, you know?
You nod as if you do know, but are mainly just trying to figure out what Brian Gary's deal could possibly be. You wonder if he saw you get lost, and this weird story was a metaphor for your incompetence, but you think there's something more to it. Together, you and Brian Gary arrive at one of those little elevated lookout towers. Brian Gary says it's his cousin's and is a good spot to wait out the dragon. While you're sitting there, you decide you might as well finish the presentation on your phone with step 7, processing the guilt. Even the most ardent anti-dragonists, you write, are sometimes stuck with sensations of regret or even lingering depression after slaying a beast. The visceral experience of getting your hands dirty can be more intense than one anticipates. Such feelings are perfectly normal and can be efficiently worked through to get you back to being a productive member of society. Try not to focus on what the world might have lost, but on what the world might have gained in terms of mitigated property damage. Remember that again, the modern era is not built for dragons, not that it's really built for people either. Remember that therapists charge by the hour, so the sooner you get over yourself, the better. Remember that you're a cog in the machine, so you should really just stop asking questions and keep on turning. You delete the last part. God, maybe you need a vacation or something, you're really slipping. Perhaps after this you could go someplace sunny, although with that mounting centaur lawsuit, you know chances are slim. Thanks, Henderson.
Nah, the trash cans are the problem,
Brian Gary says. What, you ask?
They're why the dragon's here. You can't have a trash can that tourists frequent in the woods that won't attract animals. You can try and bear-proof them or whatever, but as any park ranger will tell you, there's a significant overlap between the dumbest tourist and the smartest bear. Trying to dragon-proof a dumpster is even harder. Obviously, it's better for all parties if dragons and bears stay away from trash and keep filling their natural niches, but you can't create oases of free food and expect large animals to never show up.
Sure, you say, trying to follow, but crops attract dragons too.
Nah,
Brian Gary says.
I reckon that was just Daryl setting off his stupid fireworks again last night.
God, I hate Daryl. The Drake probably wasn't involved. You consider this, recalling some report that dragons burning crops is a waste of biofuel and probably historically exaggerated, but it must happen on occasion. Dragons are dangerous. Everyone knows that. But then you wonder, what does one do with that danger? Wolves are dangerous too, but in North America, more people are killed by vending machines or falling coconuts or cows than wolves. So should we destroy every vending machine too? Chop down every coconut tree? Slaughter every cow? And these days, dragon-related deaths are even rarer. So where's the line? How much danger are we trying to expunge from existence in the name of civilization? Will we keep ripping teeth from the forest until its gums are bleeding? There has to be a limit to all this, right? A point at which safety stops being safety and starts being something else, something that's hurting us in 1,000 tiny ways every single day. And surely, Brian Gary shushes you. A roar rises up from the distant trees, and then with a mighty breaking of trunks, you finally see the dragon clearly. It's unbelievable, indescribable, a fire drake so wondrous that the simple act of looking upon it makes you feel more in touch with reality and a more complete human being. You're so glad you're able to get a good look. and in its wake, everything feels crisper. The birds in the trees, the babbling brooks, the swaying branches, they're all so much more visceral for having been graced by something truly wild. Is this how the world was? Is this how it's meant to be? Is this...
Don't you need to give your How to Slay report now?
Oh, right, you say. You look down at your little presentation, at last finished, and you absolutely can't imagine giving it.
Although, we didn't see a dragon.
What?
We didn't see a dragon. Daryl must have been mistaken.
At last, you start to realize what he's getting at. Will people believe we didn't see anything, you ask?
Most likely. I cannot stress enough. Everyone hates Daryl.
You look at your presentation a final time, and you make your decision. After everything you've seen, everything you've thought about, it isn't a difficult one.
Well, I guess we can't slay a non-existent dragon.
Brian Gary gives you a little wink.
I think I misjudged you. You're actually quite commiserative.
Ha! I don't know the meaning of the word, you say as you struggle to recall the meaning of the word. Brian Gary drives you back to the station, and the city feels different too, somehow. You say your goodbyes, and on the train back, you gently drift off to sleep while staring out at the countryside. In your dream, you're moving high above the land, freer and mightier than you've ever felt. Birds flock to you, their wing beats a soft breeze compared to your own, and you can smell and hear everything, the animals in the forest below, and in forests 1,000 leagues away, all pulsing with vitality. And you can sense the strange two-legged creatures in their hives of glass and stone, and their rumbling metal beasts bound to paths of iron. And this is how the world is, and this is how the world was, and this is how the world was always meant to be, and nothing can separate you from it. And then you wake up. Whew. So can I tell you a secret? I think dragons are pretty cool. Shocking news coming from me, I know. However, it actually is surprising when you consider dragons and myth were once considered fire-breathing nightmares, in league with the literal devil, and now most people think they're pretty chill. When did that happen? How did we go from wanting to slay dragons to wanting to befriend them? The answer is super wild, and the worthy subject of an entire second video available right now exclusively on Nebula. But it's not the only video of mine up on Nebula. There's also one on what animal species will conquer Earth after us, one on the strange terror of joyful gods, one on my absolute favorite type of world building, and others also. Wait, okay, I've made more videos than I realized. And by using my link on screen or in the description, you can get a full 40% off a year's subscription to Nebula. That's $3 a month for all my videos 24 hours early and ad-free, which is definitely the ideal way to watch my latest hour-long documentary on Monster Hunter Wilds that I think you'll really enjoy. And there's tons of other great creators on Nebula that I'm sure you've heard of, dropping their own exclusive stuff to sweeten the deal. There are new episodes of the show Jetlag, Tierzoo has this secret Let's Play channel on there, Jacob Geller has been dropping new Nebula-only video essays pretty much every month for I want to say 3 years? It's an incredible backlog, with something for every taste. But more fundamentally, Nebula is also essential to enabling my continued uploads right here. If you want to support Curious Archive, this is the way to do it. And once you've finished watching this video's companion on how to raise a dragon, I'd recommend checking out Abolish Everything, an extra fancy original show we've put together. Each episode features different comedians complaining about societal pet peeves and continues to be downright hilarious. And, as always, if you'd like to share these videos, every Nebula subscriber gets free week-long guest passes so that friends and family can watch literally anything they want. So, Nebula, 40% off, exclusive videos, link in the description, and also on screen. Yeah, that's everything. Hey, thanks for sticking around all the way through my outro. And, as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this entry, consider lending your support by liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification icon to stay up to date on all things curious. See you in the next video.